A fashion director scrolls through images in early 2011 and stops at a face that looks impossible. A young man from Montreal stares back, his skin mapped with bones, teeth, sockets, and shadow. Nicola Formichetti thinks he is looking at makeup. Then he learns the face is tattooed. Within weeks, Rick Genest is in Paris for Mugler. Soon after, Lady Gaga stands beside him in Born This Way, her face painted to echo the skull he had placed permanently on his own. By 2012, Dermablend has made him its first male model and spokesperson, using his covered body for one of beauty advertising's most watched reveals. The world knew him as Zombie Boy. Fashion saw a visual shock it could sell. Rick had already built something far more personal. Rick Stéphane Genest was born on August 7, 1985, in La Salle, Quebec, and grew up in Châteauguay, outside Montreal. His path toward fashion began far from agencies, castings, and polished discovery stories. It started in underground rooms, sideshow spaces, and Montreal neighborhoods where presence could build a reputation long before magazines paid attention. Later profiles placed him around St. Henry, near the tracks, working odd jobs and saving money for tattoo work. That part of the city gave him a different kind of training: close rooms, direct reactions, and an audience that could not be softened by styling. Before runways, Genest performed. He worked in freak show and sideshow spaces, including Lucifer's blasphemous Mad Macabre Torture Carnival. He described eating worms, fakir work, and pain-based routines as part of his entertainment background. Those acts belonged to a performance tradition built around endurance, discomfort, timing, and control. Long before luxury fashion turned his face into campaign material, he had learned how to hold a room and make the body carry the act. The stare came with the work, but in those spaces, he could shape what the stare meant. His body project also grew out of a serious medical history. Public accounts differ slightly on his exact age, when doctors found a brain tumor, with some placing the diagnosis around 14 and others later in his teens. Genest's own telling gives the clearest shape. After blackouts and tests, doctors found a tumor near his optic nerve. He waited months for treatment and underwent surgery on August 7, 2000, his 15th birthday. He later described surviving that operation as a turning point. That teenage health crisis came before the tattoo project that would define his public image. Genest spoke about life, death, horror, anatomy, and the choice to make the body impossible to ignore. His tattoos invited attention, but they also came from experience no outside narrator can fully own. The illness gives the death imagery more weight than borrowed Gothic style. When he later walked into fashion, the skull on his face already carried a history viewers could sense before they knew the story. His first tattoo came at 16, a skull and crossbones on his shoulder. By 21, he had begun the larger skeleton project with Montreal tattoo artist Frank Lewis, who did much of the work. The process took years. Some sources took more than 3 years. Others placed the collaboration closer to 4. Lewis drew sections directly onto Genest's skin with markers before the tattooing began. Bones, insects, webs, veins, and decayed anatomical detail slowly connected into a full-body image. Guinness World Records later verified Genest for 139 human bones tattooed on his body, along with a separate record tied to 176 insect tattoos. Those numbers made the project easier for media to package. They also turned a long artistic process into something clean enough for a headline. Genest called the tattoos a gradual work of art. He spoke about them as a meditation on life and death. Horror films influenced the imagery, but the work reached beyond horror styling. It was survival, performance, and control over his own body made permanent. The familiar version begins with a tattooed stranger entering fashion. The fuller version starts earlier, in Montreal, with a young performer building an identity through pain, humor, work, and repetition. Rick Genest arrived with a language already written across his skin. That language included humor and provocation as much as darkness. He could speak about death, skulls, insects, and decaying anatomy, then cut the tension with a joke. That balance kept him from becoming the gloomy symbol other people sometimes wanted. He understood the macabre. He also knew how to perform it. His freak show background was labor, training, and community. Genest had learned how audiences react when a body challenges ordinary comfort. By the time fashion found him, Zombie Boy had a history, a method, and a public identity that existed outside the industry's permission. The path that brought Rick Genest to Paris began with an image moving through the internet faster than any traditional scouting system could have found him. In the early 2010s, fashion was still learning what online visibility could do. A person could live outside the agency circuit and still land on the screen of someone powerful enough to change his life. Nicola Formichetti, then working with Mugler, came across Genest's image online. In an interview later republished by Hypebeast, Formichetti described seeing the photo on Google and assuming the skull-covered face had been created by a makeup artist. When he realized the markings were tattooed skin, he tracked the image back to its source. He found Genest on Facebook, introduced himself, and invited him into the Muggler project. The notice period was short, roughly 2 weeks. The image traveled easily. Genest could not. He had no passport. He also had more than $10,000 in outstanding fines from earlier years of street-involved life in Montreal. Formichetti covered the costs needed to clear the way. An immigration lawyer became involved, and during the scramble, became Genest's manager. Trust, the Montreal production company connected to the shoot, had founders who knew him locally. The Paris trip came together through fashion access, legal help, local trust, and speed. His face reached the center of the Muggler project before his life could be made ready for it. Formichetti later said Genest's photographs affected the collection, pushing it darker and more gothic. The image had already started shaping the work, while Genest was still dealing with documents, fines, and the basic problem of getting to Paris. That distance between visual circulation and human logistics followed the breakthrough. Photographs of Genest moved through fashion with no resistance. Genest needed people arranging papers, clearing barriers, and translating a life outside the industry into something a runway schedule could handle. This was still the pre-Instagram fashion moment. Online images were moving faster than old gatekeepers, but the system behind them was uneven. An unknown performer from Montreal could suddenly become essential to a major Paris collection because the right person saw the right image. Getting him there took much more than excitement over a photograph. The discovery was modern, but the cleanup was old-fashioned. Papers, calls, fees, favors, and people willing to move quickly when the runway clock was already running. Formichetti's team came to Montreal in January 2011 to shoot Genest before the Paris trip. By the time Muggler's Fall 2011 menswear presentation arrived, he had become central to the show's visual logic. Vogue described the collection as Formichetti and Romain Kremer's debut, accompanied by a Mariano Vivanco film starring a young Canadian with skeletal facial tattoos. The review used the name Rico, another name associated with Genest at the time. Fashion often tells discovery stories as if the industry creates the person it finds. Genest's case moved in another direction. Formichetti saw something powerful, and that attention changed Genest's life. Still, the image that stopped him had already been built through years of tattoo work, performance, survival, and public reaction. Fashion found Zombie Boy after Rick Genest had already made him. The Paris debut moved fast, then the pop breakthrough moved even faster. After the Muggler menswear show in January 2011, Lady Gaga pulled the connection into a much larger arena. Genest appeared in the official video for Born This Way, released at the end of February 2011. Gaga's face was made up to echo his tattoo. He stood beside her with the actual skull work on his own skin, the original image sitting next to its pop star reflection. Soon after, he shared the stage with her at Muggler's women's wear show in Paris. Within roughly 2 months, Genest had gone from Montreal underground performer to Muggler centerpiece to one of the most recognizable faces in a major pop video. The scale changed before his life had time to catch up. Sideshow performance had taught him how to command attention in a room. Global attention worked differently. It repeated, clipped, reposted, copied, and flattened. The reaction centered on the image. Fashion publications framed him as Formichetti's muse, Muggler's new face, and Gaga's visual counterpart. After the video premiered, television, newspapers, and online media widened the story. Much of the coverage circled the same surface questions. Were the tattoos real? How did he look next to Gaga? What did a skull face mean inside high fashion? Some profiles gave space to Frank Lewis, the sideshow years, and Genest's own language about mortality. Genie stayed with the face. Genest noticed the distance between recognition and understanding. In interviews, he described strangers approaching him to ask about Gaga or to confirm whether the tattoos were real. Fame arrived through inspection. People saw a skull where they expected a face, and the first question was usually technical. The person behind the skull often had to wait. That kind of recognition can feel strange because it begins with the body and works backward, as if identity comes after proof. He described himself as a punk rocker at heart, closer to underground performance than fashion or pop music, while still speaking warmly about Formichetti and Gaga. That distance never fully disappeared. The world he came from had built Zombie Boy over years. The world that found him learned the image first. Those first months shaped the career that followed. Genest's professional value became tied to visual disruption. To keep working in that lane, he had to remain the thing that stopped people cold. Most models can shift hair, clothes, styling, mood from one booking to the next. Genest's defining aesthetic was permanent. The work was carried on his body. Each new booking had to answer the same commercial question. Could that body still create the reaction people expected? Genest posed no literal threat. The danger people read into him came from projection. His appearance unsettled the usual rules of beauty, and fashion often likes disruption when it can control the frame. Rick brought that disruption from outside the house, outside the campaign deck, and outside the usual machinery. That made him valuable. It also made him easier to sell as an edge before people had to understand him as his person. Gaga's presence intensified everything. Her career had already turned costume, performance, and body imagery into pop language. Beside Genest, she used the structure of his face on her own face, then placed the original next to the copy. The shot made his authorship visible, even as the public conversation still moved through her fame. In June 2012, Dermablend Professional, a beauty brand owned by L'Oreal, announced Rick Genest as its first male model and official spokesperson. The campaign was called Go Beyond the Cover. By the announcement, the campaign video had already drawn more than 15 million views online. The concept was simple and powerful. Genest appeared on camera apparently untattooed, his body covered with Dermablend leg and body cover and tattoo primer. The video then reversed the transformation, revealing the skeleton beneath. The tagline asked, "How do you judge a book?" The campaign gave Genest mainstream beauty visibility in a way few tattooed male performers had received. It also turned his body into proof of product strength. The product worked because viewers recognized the look being erased. Dermablend's press materials described him as the perfect canvas. A later campaign invited consumers to zombify themselves through a digital tool connected to the brand. Beauty advertising translated Genest into the language it knew best: cover, reveal, transformation, canvas. He had described his tattoos through mortality, horror, art, and survival. Dermablend placed the same body inside a cleaner commercial frame. The campaign did not need the full story of the tattoo project. It needed a visual extreme the product could hide on camera. The reveal worked because the audience already understood what had been covered before anyone explained the product. Genest chose to participate, and the campaign gave him one of the widest platforms of his career. It was effective, memorable, and unusually open for mainstream beauty advertising at that time. Still, its power came from a strange tension. The brand celebrated his difference while proving it could disappear. Viewers were invited to admire him through the drama of watching his most recognizable feature vanish and return. The Guinness records worked in a related way. The record for 139 tattooed bones was accurate. It also turned years of collaboration with Frank Lewis into a number that could move easily through headlines. Numbers travel cleanly, meaning takes longer. During his peak years, the commercial language around Genest kept returning to a narrow set of ideas: shock, spectacle, transformation, canvas. He could rupture conventional beauty norms. He could demonstrate a product. He could make an image impossible to ignore. The fuller account of what he had built appeared in interviews and profiles, yet it rarely controlled the commercial frame. Dermablend's campaign was carefully made. The Mugler work placed him at the center rather than the margin. The Guinness records were legitimate. Still, commercial systems compress people into the version that moves fastest. For Rick Genest, that version was the skull. The campaign expanded his visibility and gave him space to speak about judgment. It also asked millions of viewers to watch his body become acceptable by disappearing first. The product needed contrast, and Genest's body supplied it with unusual force. Rick Genest built more than a viral moment. His work moved through fashion, music, film, television, performance, and public speaking. The skull made him instantly recognizable, but the career behind it stretched across several industries. His credits included GQ, Vanity Fair, Vogue Homs, Shun Purple, ES Magazine, Traffic, and Dazed and Confused Korea. He had agency representation across several cities, including Why Not Model Management in Milan, Izio in Berlin, and Unique Models in Copenhagen. He appeared in the 2013 film 47 Ronin and in 2 2017 episodes of the BBC series Silent Witness. He was part of Rockaware's European relaunch campaign. He gave a TEDx talk in Austria. He also kept working in music, DJ sets, performance bookings, and side projects. The resume was unusual because it never stayed inside one lane. Fashion opened the largest door, but performance kept running beside it. That reach made him an international model and performer with a public image larger than a standard modeling resume. The strict fashion definition of supermodel never fit him cleanly. He came through a different door, worked across different spaces, and became recognizable for a body image no agency could have manufactured from scratch. His fashion credits clustered heavily in the early to mid-2010s. Many appearances used his body as the main visual statement. Editorials, campaigns, and media coverage often centered the skeleton face as the concept. Work beyond that image existed, especially in music and performance, but it carried less mainstream visibility. Body modification sits awkwardly inside fashion's hunger for novelty. Fashion depends on change. Extensive tattoos resist that rhythm. They cannot be swapped out for a new season or adjusted to match a trend cycle. Permanence works against an industry built on reinvention. Genest made that conflict visible. His tattoos made him visually irreplaceable, and they also made reinvention harder. A conventional model can shift hair, styling, casting category, and mood. Genest's defining aesthetic was his body. Once the first shock became familiar, there was no simple wardrobe-level pivot. He could evolve creatively, and he did, but fashion's strongest interest had begun with the first impact. His career after the viral peak should not be flattened into disappearance. He kept working, had collaborators, and continued building projects. The high fashion window was shorter than the scale of his public image suggested. It moved into a mixed creative practice with less mainstream attention. The industry knew how to use the skull. Music, DJ work, public speaking, acting, sideshow performance, and visual art ask people to follow the person behind it for longer than a single image allowed. Genest had been building that wider identity from the start. Zombie Boy was a name he had made before fashion arrived. By 2016, Genest was still working, still adding to the tattoo project, and still planning new creative work. Cult MTL found him preparing a TEDx talk in Austria, performing DJ sets, playing a block party event called Freak Off, and developing music with Alchemisty and former Rob Zombie guitarist Mike Riggs. The high fashion glare had cooled, but he had moved into another phase of the same identity. He kept returning to one idea in public comments: normal is relative. That line came from daily experience. He still received judgmental looks from strangers wherever he went. Fame had made him recognizable, but recognition did not make public life easier. It made the staring more constant. His later years do not fit a clean abandonment story. He kept working, he had collaborators, he had projects. The concentrated high fashion attention of 2011 to 2013 gave way to a mixed creative practice with less mainstream coverage. The early peak had been brief. Fashion had booked the shock of the image, and shock has a short shelf life. Tattoo visibility had also changed around him. More tattooed bodies were appearing in mainstream culture, but heavy body modification still carried stigma. Genest lived inside that contradiction. In fashion spaces, his extremity could be treated as art. On ordinary streets, it still drew stares. The same body could be celebrated in one room and treated as a disturbance in another. That split followed him without needing a new costume, because the costume was permanent and the room kept changing. In 2018, he was still publicly identifying as Zombie Boy and still developing music. His self-description had stayed consistent. He spoke as a creator with several practices connected to an identity he had built himself. The runway image was easy to follow. The musician, speaker, sideshow trained performer, and working artist asked for more attention. The daily weight of that identity appears in the things he said himself. He talked about the stares. He talked about people asking whether the tattoos were real. He talked about living outside ordinary assumptions. He did not turn those experiences into complaint. He treated them as part of the material he worked with. His later years should not be flattened into decline. He was active, sharp in interviews, and still testing what Zombie Boy could become. The audience for that work may have been smaller than the audience for the Gaga video. The quieter phase also showed how narrow the early spotlight had been. When the cameras wanted the skull, they arrived quickly. When the work became music, public speakings, small performances, and long-form identity building, the attention slowed. Genest kept moving anyway. He kept using the same name, the same body, and the same dark humor, but the context around him had changed. The public had already learned the fastest version of Zombie Boy, and the slower version asked for patience. That version had less spectacle and more labor. It had rehearsals, collaborations, interviews, and unfinished projects. It also had the ordinary problem every working artist faces after a viral peak: how to keep making work after the first reaction has already been spent. For Genest, the challenge was sharper because the first reaction had been attached to his skin. Rick Genest died on August 1, 2018. He was 32 years old. After a formal investigation, the Quebec coroner's office concluded that he died from head trauma after falling from a third-floor balcony in Montreal. The death was ruled accidental. The coroner's report noted that Genest was highly intoxicated at the time and had cannabis in his blood. It also recorded that he had previously sought help for mental health concerns and that people close to him had described episodes of voice hearing associated with substance use. The coroner found no evidence that he was in a psychotic or delirious state when he went onto the balcony. The investigation also found no clear and unequivocal intention to end his life. Homicide was ruled out. Those official findings are essential because early coverage moved in another direction. Within hours of the news, the death was widely framed as suicide. Lady Gaga posted publicly using that framing, and the claim spread quickly through media and online tributes. Genest's family and manager, Karim Leduc, pushed back within days. Leduc stated his belief that the fall was accidental. The family also raised concerns about the balcony's physical design. Gaga later apologized publicly, acknowledging that she had spoken too soon, before evidence was available. The coroner's investigation took months and eventually reached the accidental death conclusion. The sequence became a media ethics example. Mindframe, an Australian organization focused on responsible reporting around suicide and mental health, cited Genest's death as a case that showed the harm caused by publishing unconfirmed cause of death claims. The first public narrative traveled faster than the verified one. For Genest, the pattern carries a painful familiarity. During life, other people often organized his public meaning around the most visible surface: living skeleton, perfect canvas, Gaga's counterpart. After his death, another story formed quickly before the investigation had finished. The responsible version keeps the mental health context without turning it into a cause. Early coverage moved towards suicide. His family disputed that conclusion. The coroner later ruled the death accidental. Those facts create enough tension without adding certainty the record does not support. The tributes that followed were real. Gaga and Formichetti both mourned him publicly. Dolcedo management called him an icon of the artistic scene and the fashion world. Mark Quinn's self-conscious gene, a large-scale sculpture of Genest commissioned for the Science Museum's Medicine Galleries in London, became a more lasting form of public remembrance. It placed him in a cultural institution rather than another campaign cycle. There, his body could be read as medicine, mortality, art, and identity at once without a product needing to be sold. The longer industry memory is harder to see in the public record. There were tributes, there was coverage, there was grief from collaborators. What appears less visible is a sustained fashion industry memorial structure around him after the first wave passed. That is an observation about public record, not a claim about private feelings. Rick Genest spent years building Zombie Boy before fashion found a use for it. He built it through survival, performance, tattoo work, and a philosophy about mortality. He built it with Frank Lewis drawing on his skin before the needle touched. He built it in Montreal's underground, where the work already had meaning before it had market value. Fashion found something visually undeniable. It built campaigns, editorials, runway moments, and beauty advertising around that image. The skull face, skeleton body, perfect canvas language, and transformation reveal became commercial tools. The fuller person was there too. Performer, musician, freak show artist, actors, speaker, collaborator, and someone who described his work through life and death. The skull traveled faster. It needed no explanation, only a glance. The rest of him needed time, and time is the one thing fashion rarely gives an image once the first reaction passes. The career after the breakthrough was real. So was the shift after the peak. The system knew how to amplify the image. It showed less visible capacity to carry the person beyond that first impact. Genest kept calling himself Zombie Boy. He kept adding to the tattoo project. He kept making music, performing, and talking about who gets to define normal. Nothing public suggests he lost his sense of what he had made. The harder question is whether the world around him understood it with the same seriousness. Fashion's relationship to outsiders often begins with excitement. The disruption is welcomed, the image circulates. The commercial moment happens. Then the person lives with the afterlife of that circulation. The stares, scrutiny, limited roles, and public meaning attached to a body every day. The final tension sits there. The record shows collaboration, opportunity, reduction, correction, and remembrance. It also shows how quickly a self-made identity can become a marketable surface. His story does not need extra mythology. A Montreal performer survived a medical crisis, built a permanent image, entered fashion through the internet, became globally recognizable, kept working beyond the peak, and died in circumstances early coverage got wrong. The skull was the first thing people saw. It was never all of him.